You're driving home from the grocery store. You've got your bags in the back seat. You turn on the radio, but it's just static. And then you start to think maybe you should have driven a different route because now you're on this really desolate stretch of road and there are these tall trees on either side that are just kind of blocking out the sun. And then you see something in your rearview mirror. You think, oh, great, a deer or maybe a bear, maybe an elk. But then you keep driving and you're like, what was that? Because whatever it was, it didn't move. So you look at the back seat and you realize with a start that you're not alone. There's something in your back seat with you. Well, folks, that's the story I wanted to share with you today about the silent passenger. Because sometimes we feel like we're alone and we think we have everything under control, but then life throws us a curveball and all of a sudden we realize we're not alone. We have a silent passenger sitting in the back seat of our lives. You know who I'm talking about, don't you? That's right. It's grief. See, grief is a silent passenger. It sits in the back seat of our life. We try to drive on, but we're never really alone. We can pretend it's not there. We can put on the radio and turn up the volume and ignore the silence. We can look forward, focused on the road ahead, but it's always there. And sometimes grief takes over the car. Sometimes grief is sitting in the driver's seat and we're in the back seat. We may not even know how we got there, but all of a sudden, we're in the back seat, and grief is driving. And it drives in its own way. It doesn't take the most direct route. It makes lots of detours. It stops at every red light. And sometimes it just pulls over on the side of the road and makes us sit there for a while. But eventually, if we're willing, grief will give us back the keys to the car, and we can go on, but we never really shake grief. It's always going to be in the back seat with us, and when things happen, when we least expect it, grief will suddenly slink up into the front seat and take over again. It seems to come out of nowhere, but really, it was always there. When my wife and I moved to a new city almost 10 years ago, I remember that grief was in the back seat with us. My dad had passed away a few months before that, and grief was in the back seat. The car was full of boxers and moving vans and uncertainty and grief. And I remember thinking as we were pulling into our driveway in the new house, where's the remote? I want to turn on the TV and see what channel the local news is on. And my wife said, Paul, you're still holding the remote. I didn't even realize it. Grief had taken over the car. Grief was driving, and I was in the back seat. I've learned over time that grief doesn't go away. It changes form. Sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's depression, sometimes it's just this deep, abiding sadness, sometimes it's total discouragement. I think one of the hardest things we ever face in our lives is the death of a child. It doesn't matter our age. It doesn't matter if it is our biological child or a child we adopted or a grandchild or a foster child or a stepchild. When a child dies, there's this overwhelming sense of unfairness. And the question we ask is, why? Why did this happen? I remember so many times over the years when I would hear people say to me, everything happens for a reason. And I would think, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. Nothing happens for a reason.
People just make stuff up and they say everything happens for a reason. It's not true. But now I get it. Everything does happen for a reason. My son took his own life 5 years in grief is still in the back seat with me. Some days it's in the front seat. Some days it feels like it's not even there. But some days it's very present. But I'm grateful for those days because on those days I'm reminded to slow down, to pay attention, to be more aware, to listen more, to talk less. Those are the days I reach out and touch my wife's hand and I tell her I love her more. Those are the days I get up from my chair and I hug my daughter and my son and I thank God that they were here on this earth and I tell them I love them. Those are the days I stop and I smell the roses. Those are the days I take a deep breath and I count my blessings. Those are the days I look up and I whisper a prayer of gratitude and I say, thank you. Those are the days grief is in the back seat and I'm driving. And it's okay that grief is in the back seat. Because now I know grief will always be there until we finally parted by death. And then grief will be gone and I'll see my son again. Until then, though, grief is my silent passenger and I wouldn't trade those moments for the word thank you.